An hour before dawn, on the 3rd of April, 2021, on a bend of the Wollondilly River in New South Wales, a net that had caught nothing but mud for 2 seasons suddenly kicked, and inside was a single female platypus, the first recorded here in 11 years, in water the state had officially declared dead. If this is the kind of story you came for, subscribe. There are more of these comeback stories than you'd believe. Sarah Nguyen was the volunteer holding the fight net. 2 seasons she'd worked this bend, and 2 seasons the net had come up heavy with mud and nothing else. Then, an hour before first light, the mesh went tight and started to jerk in her hands. She lifted it, and there, warm and impossibly alive in her wet-cupped hands, was an animal this river was not supposed to have. The bill moved. The little webbed feet pushed at the air, the first in 11 years. The animal you're picturing, that duck-billed cartoon, is doing something under the water you would never guess. Because here's what made her hands shake. A 2019 state survey had listed the Wollondilly as biologically dead, not thinning dead, a line item in a government report, a river written off. And now one female platypus lay in the net, breathing in water that on paper had no business holding anything at all. Everyone assumed the obvious. A stray, a wanderer that had drifted down from healthier water and taken a wrong turn. The researchers said it. The volunteers said it. The survey itself would have said it. One animal against a river that had already been buried. The odds weren't long. They were a joke. She'd be gone by winter. That's not what happened. Within 18 months, the team was recording something they still can't fully explain. Not just platypus returning, the river itself was changing around them. The water, the banks, the living things in the mud, all of it waking up, faster than any restoration budget had ever managed to move it. Something one shy mammal had set in motion, and no one on that team could yet say how. I'm Peter, and this is the full story of how a shy, egg-laying mammal came back to rivers. Australia had already buried and quietly dragged a whole ecosystem back to life with it. We'll follow the numbers. We'll get to the one mechanism almost nobody has heard of, and we'll find the small, cheap lever that started all of it. But first you have to understand what you're looking at, because a platypus is not what you think it is. Hold on to this one idea, because everything that follows turns on it. A platypus is not living in the river, it is building it. Each animal digs up to 20 meters of bank burrows into the soft earth of the edge. Every night, it works the bottom, plowing its bill and forepaws through the silt, hunting yabbies, turning the stream bed over like a farmer turns soil. Sediment clouds up behind it. Oxygen goes down into ground that had gone still and airless. One small mammal, quietly rewiring the entire floor of the river night after night, and no one had thought to ask, what happens to a river when you take that builder away? But before you can understand what one animal rebuilt, you have to see what we broke. Because by 2008, something had already stripped most of them out of the whole system. And a team at the University of New South Wales gave this river a name so bleak it reads like an obituary carved into the water. Functional Extinction Corridor. That was the phrase they chose. The words, a team at the University of New South Wales Platypus Conservation Initiative, set on the cover of a field report, cold as a coroner's note. And they weren't being dramatic, they were being precise. Because by 2008, 3 slow things had done the work of a flood. Decades of land clearing had peeled the trees off the banks, so the soil had nothing left to hold it. Then the dams came, walls of grey concrete that stopped the water breathing and pooled it warm and still. And on top of that, the drought pressed down for years. Across the whole Hawkesbury-Nepean system, platypus numbers had fallen by an estimated 62%. Put plainly, better than 6 in every 10 simply gone. You could see what was left. The water skinned over green, a thick mat of algae lying flat on a river that had stopped moving. The banks stood bare and crumbling, and where a platypus once dug its tunnels, there was only smooth, dead mud. And the floor of the river, the stream bed itself, sat undisturbed. Nobody was turning it anymore. That last part sounds like the smallest thing on the list. It's actually the whole story. Here's the part that genuinely unsettled the researchers, and the part almost nobody has heard. The platypus isn't reacting to a clean river, it's making one. Follow it down into the dark. A platypus feeds with its eyes shut and its bill working blind, shoving its whole face into the bed of the river, hunting yabbies, churning the silt over and over all night long. And every time it does that, it does two things at once. It lets trapped oxygen rise up out of the mud, a fine stream of bubbles you can actually watch lift off the disturbed bed. And it buries the nutrients, the rot, and the runoff that were feeding the algae choking the surface. Stir the floor, and the water breathes, and the green starves. Stop stirring it, and the whole thing runs backwards, in a loop that feeds itself. The algae blooms, the oxygen crashes, the river slides further into the dark. Picture the riverbed as a lung. Stop turning it, and it stops breathing. Scientists have a name for an animal that does this. A keystone bioturbator, a creature small enough to hold in two hands, whose ordinary nightly digging quietly keeps an entire river alive. Now, the mechanisms still argued over at the edges, exactly how much oxygen, exactly which nutrients, but the principle holds. Kill the churning, and the river suffocates. Restart it, and the water heals from the bed up, which leaves you with one dizzying question. If the animal is the medicine, what happens if you simply put it back? Here's where the story tips into the almost absurd. You'd expect bulldozers and millions of dollars. It was neither. They didn't stock the river with fish, they didn't dredge the channel, or pour in concrete, or run some 10-year management plan. They did two small things. They found one side channel that had silted up and choked closed. Years ago, a narrow arm of the river blocked solid with debris, and they cleared it, reconnected it to the main flow. And they brought in 11 translocated platypus from a healthier catchment near Bombala, a few hours to the south, carried up in ventilated crates and lowered into water everyone had already written off. 11 animals, one unblocked channel. Against a river the state had declared dead. That was the entire intervention. And this is the part I keep turning over. They opened the side channel, let those 11 platypus slip into the buried water, and then they walked away. On purpose. No feeding, no fencing, no fixing, no clever human hand steering it. They pulled the one small lever and got out of the way. And then everyone waited to see what a river left completely alone would actually do. The answer came back 3 years later, and it did not read like a recovery. It came back as a paper, a 2023 study in PNAS, led by Dr. Marion Fletcher, and the figures inside it did not read like a recovery. They read like a resurrection. Start with the water itself. Fletcher's team ran dissolved oxygen readings up and down, the same stretch that FightNet had sat in for 2 empty seasons. The oxygen in the water, the thing that lets a river breathe. Dissolved oxygen levels up 41%. Read that number again, up 41% in water. A state survey had officially called dead. Not nudged, not creeping back over a decade. Nearly half again as much life-giving oxygen in 3 years, in a channel nobody had bothered to hope for. And the numbers kept coming. Rakali, the native water rat, a sleek little swimmer that had gone quiet on the Wollondilly for years, turned up on the banks again. Unprompted, uninvited, nobody's project. Then, the small, unglamorous heart of it. Macroinvertebrate diversity nearly tripling in the same 3 years. The mayflies, the caddis, the tiny shrimp and worms in the mud that everything larger feeds on, the base of the whole living pyramid, roughly 3 times richer than when they started. Here is what makes that so strange, and so exactly right. No one engineered any of it. They didn't stock those insects. They didn't seed that oxygen. Every restoration budget that had ever been thrown at a river like this tried to build the recovery from the top down, and none of them had matched what happened when 11 animals were simply allowed to do their work. The platypus went in, and it did the one thing a platypus does. It churned the stream bed, digging for yabbies, turning the floor of the river over night after night. It lifted the trapped, suffocating sediment and let the water breathe from the bed up. The builder was back on the job, and the river woke around it precisely as the mechanism said it would. That's the title's whole promise, landed. The platypus is reappearing not because someone cleaned the river first. The platypus is the reason the river got clean. So let me be honest about what this story does not solve. That, to me, is the heart of it. I won't tell you this fixes everything. It doesn't undo the dams sitting upstream, still choking the flow. It doesn't bring back the platypus that drowned, tangled, and out of air in illegal yabby traps left in the shallows, an ugly, ordinary death that hasn't stopped. And one good bend of one river in New South Wales is not a continent. The gains here are real. They are also fragile. Pull the wrong lever, and a waking river can go quiet again. And yet, long before the survey, before the nets, before anyone wrote the word dead in a report, the Gundungurra people of that valley already had a name for this animal. Malangong. They watched it work these waters for thousands of years. And 3 bends downstream from where Sarah Nguyen's net first kicked, there is an old station sign, weathered grey, that still reads Malangong Crossing, a place named, generations ago, for a creature everyone had lately decided was gone. The animal fell silent. The name did not. The name outlasted the silence. So maybe the lesson isn't that we healed a river. We didn't. We reconnected one blocked side channel, carried in 11 animals from a healthier catchment near Bombala. And then we did the hardest thing of all. We stepped back, off the animal that could always do this, and let it. We stopped standing on the builder. That was the whole trick. If that lands for you, I'd genuinely like to hear it. Tell me in the comments which vanished animal near you came back, the one everyone said was finished, that quietly wasn't, and subscribe. There are more of these comeback stories than you'd believe. I keep finding them, because somewhere on the Wollondilly right now, an hour before dawn, in water, a survey once buried, a net is kicking again. Something heavy and warm and impossible turning in the mesh. A shy, egg-laying mammal, back where it belongs, quietly dragging a whole dead river up into the light behind it. Thanks for watching.